If you ever wake up wearing 3 matching rings you don't remember putting on, don't ask who loves you, ask what happened while you were asleep. That was the first thought that crossed Ethan Carter's mind as pale morning sunlight spilled through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Manhattan. The skyline shimmered beneath a cloudless spring sky, and somewhere far below, traffic hummed with the familiar rhythm of another busy weekday. Nothing about the room looked familiar. The suite was enormous, elegant without trying too hard, decorated in warm walnut, brushed steel, and quiet luxury that whispered old money instead of showing it off. Ethan pushed himself upright on the king-sized bed, his head heavy with the lingering haze of exhaustion rather than pain. He remembered attending a charity gala the previous evening to deliver illustrations commissioned for a children's foundation. He remembered smiling for photographs, accepting sparkling water after declining several drinks, and talking to strangers whose names had already slipped away. After that, everything dissolved into scattered flashes that refused to connect. A ballroom filled with crystal lights. Someone laughing beside him. Music echoing across polished marble floors. Then nothing. He rubbed his temples before freezing. 3 silver rings rested on his left hand. They weren't stacked together but carefully placed across 3 different fingers, each carrying a unique design. One was brushed platinum engraved with a subtle compass. Another featured a thin black inlay framed by polished silver. The third bore a tiny crest he had never seen before. Ethan stared at them in disbelief. He was absolutely certain he hadn't owned any of them yesterday. His pulse quickened as he slipped off the blanket and stood. His neatly folded clothes rested on a nearby chair, freshly pressed as though someone had taken great care to organize everything while he slept. His wallet sat untouched beside his phone, now fully charged. Nothing appeared stolen. Nothing appeared damaged. It was almost too perfect. The bedroom door clicked softly before opening. A tall man in a charcoal suit stepped inside carrying 2 mugs of coffee. Silver-grey eyes met Ethan's with calm recognition. Nathan Hayes. Even Ethan recognized one of New York's most influential investment CEOs from magazine covers and televised interviews. Nathan offered a faint, controlled smile. "Good morning. I'm glad you're awake." Ethan blinked twice. "Why am I here?" Before Nathan answered, another voice drifted in from the adjoining room. "Because leaving now would create more problems than staying." Adrian Brooks entered carrying a tablet beneath one arm. The nationally known healthcare executive looked remarkably composed for someone Ethan had supposedly never met before. His expression wasn't cold. It was concerned, almost protective. Ethan instinctively stepped backward until he felt the edge of the bed behind him. "I don't understand any of this." "You don't need to," Adrian replied gently. "Not yet." A third figure appeared moments later, adjusting the cuffs of a navy dress shirt with effortless confidence. Lucas Sterling flashed an easy smile that somehow made the room feel both lighter and more unpredictable. "First things first," Lucas said. "Breakfast. Questions after that." Ethan looked from one face to the next, hoping someone would laugh and admit this had to be an elaborate misunderstanding. Nobody did. Instead, all 3 men noticed his hand at nearly the same moment. Nathan quietly set the coffee down. Adrian folded his arms. Lucas's smile faded just enough to reveal genuine surprise. "So," Lucas murmured, "you still have all 3 rings." Ethan instinctively covered his hand. "What does that mean?" Silence settled across the suite. Outside, helicopters crossed the Manhattan skyline while distant sirens echoed several blocks away, ordinary sounds from an ordinary city that suddenly felt unimaginably far away. Nathan finally spoke, his voice steady and measured. "It means the morning didn't erase last night." Ethan swallowed hard. "Then tell me what happened." The 3 CEOs exchanged a brief glance that carried years of unspoken understanding. None of them answered. Ethan searched their faces one more time, hoping someone would finally smile and admit the entire morning was an elaborate misunderstanding, but the silence remained stubbornly intact. Nathan reached for one of the coffee mugs and slid it across the polished dining table without stepping any closer. "You should eat first," he said calmly. "You will think more clearly afterward." Ethan ignored the coffee. "I am leaving." None of the three men moved to block him. That somehow unsettled him more than if they had. He crossed the spacious living area toward the private elevator, passing walls decorated with contemporary paintings worth more than he could probably earn in several years. The elevator panel lit up when he pressed the button, then immediately displayed a single message across the screen. "Temporary security lock. Please contact reception." Ethan frowned and pressed another button. Nothing changed. "Is this your idea of a joke?" he asked over his shoulder. Lucas answered first. "No. It started at 6 this morning." "Who locked it?" Ethan demanded. Adrian looked down at the tablet in his hands before meeting Ethan's eyes. "Building management received instructions before sunrise." "From who?" Adrian hesitated. "That is exactly what we are trying to determine." Ethan stared at him, unable to tell whether the answer was genuine or carefully rehearsed. He pulled his phone from his pocket. Full battery. Excellent signal. He opened a ride-share application. Every nearby driver disappeared from the screen one after another until a grey notification appeared stating that service was temporarily unavailable for his location. He tried another application. The same result. His pulse climbed another notch. "This is impossible." Nathan quietly placed his own phone on the dining table and rotated it toward Ethan. "Try calling anyone you trust." Ethan selected his younger sister's number. The call connected immediately before ending without a single ring. He tried his closest friend. The same thing happened. Then he attempted to dial emergency services, but instead of connecting, the screen froze for several seconds before returning to the home page. Ethan slowly lowered the phone. "What did you do?" Nathan answered without raising his voice. "Nothing." "Then explain this." "I wish I could." Lucas walked toward the massive windows overlooking the city. By now every security agency in Manhattan probably believes this building is handling a confidential corporate summit. Ethan laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "That is ridiculous." "It is," Lucas admitted. "Which is why we are worried." Ethan looked from one man to the next. Everything about them contradicted itself. They appeared composed but genuinely uneasy. Wealthy enough to control almost anything, yet somehow unable to explain what was happening inside their own building. He glanced back toward the hallway where his folded clothes had been waiting earlier. Something caught his attention. His messenger bag rested beside the console table exactly where he would have left it. He hurried over and unzipped it. His sketchbook remained inside. His identification card. His wallet. Even the envelope containing payment from the charity foundation had not been touched. Nothing was missing. Tucked neatly inside the front pocket, however, rested a folded cream-colored card he had never seen before. Ethan unfolded it carefully. There were only 6 typed words. "Do not remove the rings before noon." No signature. No logo. No explanation. His breathing slowed as a chill settled across the room despite the morning sunlight pouring through the glass. "Did one of you leave this?" he asked quietly. Nathan immediately shook his head. Adrian stepped closer, studying the paper without touching it. Lucas's expression lost every trace of his earlier confidence. "I have never seen that before," Lucas admitted. Ethan turned the card over. Blank. Then he looked back at the 3 unfamiliar rings circling his fingers. "If none of you wrote it," he whispered, "who knew I would wake up here?" Before anyone could answer, a soft chime echoed through the penthouse. Adrian's tablet vibrated. His face changed the instant he read the notification. Nathan stood. Lucas stopped smiling altogether. Ethan watched all 3 of them exchange the same alarmed glance. Finally Nathan looked directly at Ethan and spoke with measured seriousness. Someone else knows you are here. The notification remained on Adrian's screen for only a few seconds before disappearing behind a secure login page, but the change in his expression told Ethan far more than the words themselves ever could. Nathan crossed the room first, his movements calm but purposeful, while Lucas quietly closed the curtains just enough to reduce the direct view into the penthouse from neighboring buildings. The bright Manhattan skyline was still visible, yet the room suddenly felt smaller, more private, and infinitely more tense. Ethan folded the mysterious card and slipped it into his pocket. "Someone is going to explain what is happening," he said firmly. "Right now." Nathan nodded once. "You deserve answers. Unfortunately, we only have pieces of them." Ethan let out a frustrated breath. "Start with the simplest question. How did I get here?" Adrian looked at Nathan before answering. "You arrived shortly after 1 o'clock this morning." "With who?" "All three of us." Ethan frowned. "That makes no sense. I have never met any of you before yesterday." Lucas leaned against the kitchen island. "That part is true. Then why would I willingly come here?" Silence returned. Ethan could almost hear the heating system humming behind the walls. Finally Nathan spoke. "Because you asked us not to leave you alone." Ethan immediately shook his head. "I would remember saying something like that." "Normally, yes," Nathan replied. "But you looked frightened." "Not confused. Frightened." Tiny fragments flickered through Ethan's mind without warning. Crystal chandeliers reflecting across polished marble. Someone placing a glass of water into his hands. A crowded ballroom that suddenly felt unbearably loud. A familiar melody playing somewhere far away. Then another image surfaced for less than a heartbeat. 3 different hands reaching toward him from opposite directions. The memory vanished before he could grasp it. Ethan pressed his fingertips against his forehead. "I keep seeing pieces." Adrian stepped forward carefully. "Do not force them. Memories return more reliably when they are not chased." Ethan looked at the 3 rings again. "Did I put these on myself?" None of them answered immediately. Lucas broke the silence first. "Yes." Ethan stared at him. "I chose this." "Every single one," Lucas said quietly. "Nobody forced you." The answer raised more questions than it solved. Ethan turned one ring slowly around his finger, noticing tiny initials engraved inside the band. The second ring carried an A. The third carried an L. Nathan. Adrian. Lucas. His stomach tightened. "Why would I wear your initials?" Nathan's expression remained unreadable. "That is what we have been trying to understand since sunrise." Before Ethan could respond, the large television mounted across the living room suddenly powered on by itself. No remote had been touched. The screen flickered through static before displaying a single still image. Ethan froze. It was security footage from the previous night's charity gala. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m. The camera overlooked one of the quieter hallways outside the ballroom. Ethan watched himself walk into view wearing the same navy suit he vaguely remembered choosing for the event. Seconds later Nathan appeared from another corridor. Then Adrian. Then Lucas. None of them looked surprised to see one another. Instead, all 4 stood together for nearly a minute speaking calmly. There was no panic. No argument. No obvious distress. Then, in full view of the camera, Ethan smiled. He reached into his jacket pocket, removed a small velvet box, opened it, and one by one placed the 3 rings onto his own hand while the 3 men watched in complete silence. The recording ended before another second could play. The television returned to a black screen. Ethan remained perfectly still, unable to breathe for several moments. "That cannot be real," he whispered. Adrian slowly lowered the tablet in his hands. "That footage was sent to me anonymously exactly 2 minutes before you woke up." Nathan's phone vibrated on the dining table. He read one sentence, and every trace of composure disappeared from his face. Without saying a word, he turned the screen toward the others. The message contained only one line. The next memory returns at noon. The words refused to leave Ethan's mind. The next memory returns at noon. He checked the clock mounted above the fireplace. 11:43. 17 minutes suddenly felt longer than an entire night. No one in the penthouse spoke for several seconds. Nathan finally broke the silence by placing his phone face down on the table. Whatever is happening, someone wants us to wait. Ethan laughed under his breath. I am tired of people telling me to wait. He walked back toward the windows and looked down at the streets nearly 60 floors below. Yellow taxis drifted through intersections. Office workers crossed sidewalks carrying coffee cups. The city looked perfectly ordinary, completely unaware that somewhere above it 4 people were trying to solve a mystery that none of them understood. Yesterday I was delivering artwork to a charity event, Ethan said quietly without turning around. Today I cannot even leave a building. Tell me something that actually makes sense. Adrian joined him, remaining several feet away. I can tell you one fact that has not changed. Ethan looked at him. You never appeared frightened whenever we spoke last night. We spoke for nearly 40 minutes. Ethan searched Adrian's face for any sign of deception. There was none. Nathan opened a secure folder on his laptop and rotated the screen toward Ethan. These are the only photographs we have recovered from the gala. The first image showed Ethan standing beside a display of children's artwork, smiling naturally while explaining one of his illustrations to several donors. The second showed Nathan arriving with business partners. The third showed Adrian greeting hospital administrators. The fourth showed Lucas speaking to reporters outside the ballroom. Separate moments. Separate lives. Then came the fifth photograph. All 4 of them stood together around one of Ethan's framed paintings. Ethan's expression caught his attention immediately. He looked comfortable. Relaxed. As though he had known the 3 men for years instead of minutes. Who took this? Ethan asked. The event photographer, Nathan replied. The original file disappeared from the gala archive this morning. Lucas folded his arms. Someone emailed us the only surviving copy. Ethan zoomed in on the image. Behind the 4 of them, partially reflected in a polished glass display case, stood another person. The figure was blurred, almost hidden by the reflection, wearing a dark coat and holding something that resembled a phone pointed directly toward them. Ethan frowned. Did any of you notice this person last night? All 3 studied the image carefully before slowly shaking their heads. Adrian enlarged the reflection until it became too distorted to identify. It could be anyone. Or someone making sure we would all be together, Nathan added. Ethan looked back at the clock. 11:56. His heartbeat gradually matched the ticking seconds. Without warning, another sensation washed over him. Not pain. Not dizziness. Recognition. The scent of fresh lilies. The sound of a piano playing somewhere nearby. Warm light reflecting across crystal chandeliers. A voice saying, "You should keep these together." Ethan closed his eyes. The ballroom returned in scattered fragments. He remembered standing beside a quiet hallway away from the crowd. Nathan had been holding bottled water instead of champagne. Adrian had been checking messages on his tablet. Lucas had been making Ethan laugh with an intentionally terrible joke about billionaires bidding on paintings they did not understand. The memory felt astonishingly ordinary. There had been no fear. No argument. Just conversation. Then another face entered the memory. Ethan could not see it clearly. Only a silhouette standing at the end of the hallway, watching. The image dissolved before he could focus. Ethan opened his eyes and took a sharp breath. There was someone else. The 3 CEOs looked at him immediately. I still cannot see the face, Ethan admitted. But someone was watching us before I ever put on these rings. The grandfather clock in the corner chimed once. Noon had arrived. At that exact instant, every screen inside the penthouse lit up simultaneously. The television. Nathan's laptop. Adrian's tablet. Lucas's phone. Even Ethan's own phone awakened without being touched. A single video began playing across every display. The camera pointed directly at Ethan from the previous night. He was looking straight into the lens, calm, focused, and completely unlike the confused man standing in the penthouse now. Then the version of Ethan on the screen spoke 6 words that froze everyone in the room. Do not believe my first memory back. The room fell completely silent as every screen replayed the same recording in perfect synchronization. Ethan watched himself on the display with growing disbelief. The version of him in the video did not appear frightened or confused. He looked focused, almost as though he had rehearsed every word before speaking. The recorded Ethan glanced over his shoulder briefly, smiled at someone standing outside the camera's view, then looked directly back into the lens. If you are watching this, he continued calmly, it means the memory reset worked exactly as planned. Nathan inhaled sharply. Adrian lowered his tablet. Lucas quietly muttered, "That is impossible." Ethan stared at the screen. Memory reset. The recorded Ethan nodded as though anticipating the question. Do not panic. If you cannot remember making this video, that was intentional. You asked us to protect the truth until your mind could rebuild it safely. The recording paused for less than a second before continuing. The 3 men beside you are going to tell 3 different stories. Listen to every one of them. None of them are lying. None of them know everything. Ethan slowly turned toward the 3 CEOs. Their expressions revealed genuine surprise. Whatever they had expected, it clearly was not this. You have seen this before? Ethan asked. Nathan immediately answered. Never. Adrian added, this is the first time any of us have heard those words. Lucas nodded in agreement. If someone fabricated this, they know far too much. The recording continued. Nathan remembers what happened before midnight. Adrian remembers what happened after midnight. Lucas remembers what happened before sunrise. Compare every version carefully. The missing hours are where the real answer exists. The screen suddenly went black. Every device in the penthouse shut itself off simultaneously. Ethan remained frozen. That cannot be real, he whispered. I would never erase my own memory. Nathan walked to the window, his reflection stretching across the glass. Until this morning I would have agreed. Adrian sat down at the dining table and folded his hands. But now we know something important. Ethan looked at him. What? You expected this to happen? Ethan replayed the words in his head. The memory reset worked exactly as planned. Protect the truth. Listen to 3 stories. It sounded less like a warning and more like carefully prepared instructions. Lucas broke the silence first. The video gave us an order. Ethan frowned. An order? 3 stories, Lucas replied. 1 from each of us. Nathan nodded slowly. If that is what you wanted before your memories disappeared, then perhaps that is where we begin. Ethan pulled out one of the dining chairs and sat down. His hands instinctively touched the 3 rings again. Somehow they no longer felt like random pieces of jewelry. They felt like markers left behind by someone who understood far more than he did now. Nathan remained standing. I will tell my version first because according to the recording, mine begins earliest. Ethan looked directly at him. Then start at the beginning. Nathan took a slow breath. Yesterday evening I attended the charity gala expecting nothing more than another fundraising event. I had never met you before. At least, that is what I believed. Then you walked straight toward me, smiled as though we were old friends, and asked me one question. Ethan leaned forward. What question? Nathan's expression became unusually thoughtful. You asked whether I still trusted the promise we made 6 months ago. Ethan blinked. 6 months. Nathan nodded. I told you we had never met. Ethan waited. You smiled and said that was exactly the answer you expected. Lucas exchanged a puzzled glance with Adrian. He never told us that. Nathan looked at them with equal confusion. Because I assumed it was simply a strange joke. Adrian slowly shook his head. He never asked me anything about 6 months ago. Lucas crossed his arms. Me neither. Ethan felt another tiny fragment stir somewhere beyond his reach. Not a complete memory. Just the feeling of standing beneath warm lights while saying the words, trust me. Even if you forget. Before he could hold on to the sensation, Nathan quietly added one final sentence that made every person in the room question everything they thought they knew. 5 minutes after we first met, you greeted Adrian and Lucas as though you had known them for years as well. No one interrupted Nathan after his final sentence. The weight of his version settled over the room like a dense morning fog. Ethan searched his own thoughts, hoping that hearing the story would unlock something familiar, but only scattered impressions surfaced. A polished ballroom. Soft piano music. The scent of fresh flowers. Friendly conversations. Nothing explained why he would have acted as though he already knew 3 of the most recognizable business leaders in the country. Adrian finally leaned forward. According to the recording, my memories begin after midnight. Ethan nodded slowly. Tell me everything. Do not leave out a single detail. Adrian rested both hands on the table, speaking with the calm precision that had made him one of the country's most respected medical executives. When I first joined you, Nathan, and Lucas, you seemed completely comfortable. You introduced us to one another as if you were hosting the conversation instead of attending it. You even joked that the 4 of us looked like the beginning of a terrible business podcast. Lucas smiled faintly. I remember that joke. Adrian continued. You asked us to leave the ballroom because you said there were too many cameras inside. You specifically requested someplace quiet. Ethan frowned. Did I say why? Yes, Adrian answered. You said that some conversations should never happen where everyone expects them. Another faint memory brushed against Ethan's mind. Walking down a long hallway covered with framed black and white photographs. Holding a bottle of water. Hearing his own footsteps echo across polished marble. Then the memory disappeared again. Adrian continued. We entered one of the smaller reception lounges reserved for sponsors. It was empty except for refreshments and comfortable seating. You closed the door yourself before speaking. Nathan quietly added, that is where I left. I had an urgent call from my office. Adrian nodded. Exactly. Nathan stepped out first. About 5 minutes later you turned toward Lucas and me with a completely different expression. Ethan felt his heartbeat quicken. Different how? Serious, Adrian replied. You looked directly at us and asked whether we believed memories could be stolen without anyone realizing it. Ethan blinked. What did you say? Lucas laughed because he thought you were describing a science fiction movie. I answered that memory can certainly be altered by stress, illness, or trauma, but not in the way you described. Lucas rubbed the back of his neck. Then you corrected both of us. Ethan stared at him. What did I say? Lucas's usual confidence faded. You said memories are not always erased. Sometimes they are replaced with better stories. The sentence sent another ripple through Ethan's mind. Better stories. The words felt strangely familiar, almost comforting, yet he could not remember why. Adrian continued. You reached into your jacket pocket and placed 3 small ring boxes on the coffee table. Ethan instinctively looked at his hand. 3 separate boxes. Adrian nodded. Each box contained 1 ring. You told us they represented 3 promises that had to remain connected until noon the following day. Nathan looked puzzled. You never mentioned that part to me. Because you had already left, Adrian answered quietly. Ethan struggled to connect the growing pieces. Did either of you ask what the promises meant? Lucas sighed. Of course we did. You smiled and said we would each remember only one piece of the answer. Ethan felt a chill run through him. The recording had said exactly the same thing. Nathan remembered before midnight. Adrian remembered after midnight. Lucas remembered before sunrise. 3 stories. 3 rings. 3 promises. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Adrian folded his hands once more. Then something happened that I still cannot explain. Your phone rang. You looked at the screen, but instead of answering, your smile disappeared completely. Ethan swallowed. Who called me? Adrian slowly shook his head. The screen was facing away. From us. I never saw the name. Lucas quietly finished the story. But I will never forget what you said after the phone stopped ringing. Ethan looked directly at him. Lucas's expression turned unexpectedly serious. You looked at both of us and whispered, "He found us sooner than I expected." The room seemed quieter after Lucas finished speaking, as though even the city outside had paused to listen. Ethan repeated the sentence in his mind. He found us sooner than I expected. Whoever that mysterious person was, the words carried no anger, only resignation, as if Ethan had been preparing for an inevitable meeting that arrived ahead of schedule. Then what happened next? Ethan asked softly. Lucas took a slow breath before continuing. You stood up immediately. You looked through the glass wall of the reception lounge toward the ballroom. Hundreds of guests were still enjoying the gala, but your attention locked onto one person across the room. I followed your line of sight. I never saw anyone unusual. Adrian nodded. Neither did I. But you did, Ethan said quietly. Lucas nodded once. Apparently. Ethan closed his eyes, hoping another fragment would surface. For a split second he saw polished marble reflecting warm chandelier light. Elegant dresses. Black tuxedos. Smiling donors. Then, standing perfectly still near the entrance, a tall silhouette wearing a dark overcoat. The face remained hidden behind a glare of crystal lights. The image vanished before Ethan could focus on it. I still cannot see who it is, he admitted. Lucas continued. You asked Adrian to stay inside while you and I walked into the hallway. Once we were alone, you said something I have replayed in my head all morning. Ethan looked directly at him. What did I say? Lucas answered without hesitation. You said, if anything happens after tonight, promise me you will remember sunrise. Ethan frowned. Sunrise? That was the exact word. Nathan exchanged a puzzled glance with Adrian. Lucas continued. I asked why sunrise mattered. You smiled and pointed toward the east-facing windows overlooking the river. You said the truth always looks different after the first light of day. Ethan felt another strange sensation ripple through his thoughts. A rooftop. Cool morning air. The first orange light stretching across Manhattan. Standing beside someone whose face remained hidden. The memory dissolved before he could grasp it. Then my phone rang, Lucas said. The same call Adrian mentioned. You looked at the screen for several seconds without answering. After the ringing stopped, you became unusually calm. Calm? Ethan repeated. Almost relieved, Lucas replied. You told me the schedule had changed. Nathan folded his arms. Schedule? Lucas nodded. You said the fourth person had already arrived. Every eye in the room turned toward Ethan. Fourth person, Ethan whispered. Not one of you. No, Nathan answered immediately. Adrian slowly added, we assumed you meant another guest. Lucas shook his head. But then you corrected me. You specifically said, not a guest. The only person who remembers everything. A heavy silence settled across the penthouse. Ethan looked down at the 3 rings resting on his fingers. 3 memories. 3 witnesses. Yet every clue pointed toward someone else entirely. Someone who had never entered any of their conversations, yet somehow knew exactly how the night would unfold. Suddenly Nathan's laptop emitted a soft notification tone. Nobody had touched it. The screen awakened automatically, displaying a secure email that had arrived only seconds earlier. There was no sender name, only an encrypted address that disappeared almost immediately after opening. The email contained a single attachment labeled Sunrise. Adrian clicked it before anyone could object. A photograph slowly filled the screen. It showed the rooftop of the very building where they now stood, captured at dawn. A figure stood near the edge overlooking the river. Nathan. Adrian. Lucas. Ethan recognized each of them instantly. Then he noticed someone else standing beside Ethan. The fifth figure wore a long dark coat and faced directly toward the camera while everyone else looked toward the sunrise. The face was perfectly clear this time. Ethan's heart skipped. The stranger was not a stranger at all. He was looking at himself. For several long seconds, nobody moved. Ethan kept staring at the photograph, convinced his eyes were playing tricks on him. The fifth figure standing beside him wore a dark coat identical to the silhouette that had haunted every fragment of his returning memories. The posture was different, the expression was more confident, but the face was unmistakably his own. "That cannot be me," Ethan whispered. Adrian enlarged the image until every feature became perfectly clear. The stranger had Ethan's eyes, Ethan's smile, even the small scar near his left eyebrow that he had carried since childhood. There was only one obvious difference. The man in the photograph looked completely certain of himself, while Ethan felt more uncertain with every passing minute. Nathan quietly studied the picture before speaking. Either this image has been manipulated by someone with extraordinary skill, or there is another explanation we have not considered. Lucas folded his arms. There is one more detail. Everyone looked at him. The Ethan standing beside us on that rooftop is wearing the rings on his right hand. Ethan instinctively looked down at his own left hand. The 3 silver rings remained exactly where he had first discovered them. It seemed like a tiny difference, yet somehow it made the entire mystery even stranger. Adrian leaned closer to the screen. The timestamp says 6:14 in the morning. Nathan nodded thoughtfully. Which means it was taken after everything I remember, after everything Adrian remembers, and during the period Lucas was supposed to witness. Lucas slowly exhaled. Then perhaps it is finally my turn to explain the last piece. Ethan looked directly at him. You said you remembered sunrise. Lucas nodded. I remember waking up in this penthouse shortly before dawn. You were already awake. Ethan frowned. Me? Yes, Lucas answered. Only now I am no longer certain which version of you it was. The room fell silent again. Lucas continued carefully, choosing every word. Nathan and Adrian were still asleep in separate guest rooms. You asked me to follow you onto the rooftop because you wanted to watch the sunrise before everyone else woke up. I assumed you simply needed fresh air. Ethan listened without interrupting. When we reached the roof, Lucas continued, you were standing alone near the east side overlooking the river. At least I believed you were alone. Then I blinked. Lucas hesitated. When I opened my eyes again, there were 2 of you. Nathan's expression hardened with disbelief. Adrian stared at Lucas without speaking. Ethan felt his heartbeat echo in his ears. You expect us to believe that? Lucas shook his head. No. I barely believe it myself. They stood only a few feet apart, speaking quietly. Neither one looked surprised to see the other. I could not hear the conversation because the wind carried their voices away. Ethan swallowed. What happened next? The man in the dark coat looked toward me first. He smiled as though he had been expecting me all along. Then he handed something to you. Ethan instinctively touched the pocket where the mysterious cream-colored card still rested. Lucas slowly shook his head. It was not the card. Then what was it? Lucas looked at the rings on Ethan's hand before answering. A small silver key. Ethan's memories stirred violently. For the first time, the fragments remained together instead of disappearing. He saw the rooftop glowing beneath the first orange light of dawn. He saw himself accepting a tiny silver key from the mysterious man. He heard a voice that sounded exactly like his own saying, "When the three stories become one, open the final door." The memory ended there, but one final detail remained. Hanging from the silver key was a white tag with a single number printed in black ink. Room 1108. Before Ethan could tell the others what he had remembered, a soft mechanical click echoed from somewhere inside the penthouse. All four men turned toward the hallway at the same time. One of the doors that had remained locked since morning was now slowly opening by itself. The slow creak of the opening door echoed through the silent penthouse until it finally stopped. None of the four men spoke. Ethan felt an unfamiliar certainty settle over him, replacing the confusion that had ruled the entire morning. Every clue had pointed toward this moment. 3 rings. 3 stories. 3 witnesses. And now, one final door. Nathan stepped forward first, but Ethan gently raised his hand. "No," he said quietly. "I think this one is meant for me." None of them argued. Together they walked down the hallway, their footsteps measured against the polished hardwood floor. The door had opened only a few inches, revealing a narrow strip of warm light beyond it. Ethan rested his fingers against the edge and slowly pushed it wider. The room inside looked nothing like the luxurious penthouse surrounding it. It was simple, almost peaceful. A wooden desk stood beside a large window overlooking the Hudson River. Fresh lilies rested in a glass vase exactly as Ethan remembered from his returning memories. A coffee mug sat untouched beside a leather notebook. Everything appeared carefully arranged, as though someone had prepared the room only moments earlier before quietly stepping outside. Ethan's attention immediately settled on a small silver key resting in the center of the desk. A white tag hung from it. Room 1108. Exactly as he had remembered. He picked it up carefully. Beneath the key lay a sealed envelope with his own handwriting across the front. To Ethan. Open only after the stories become one. His heartbeat quickened as he unfolded the letter. The handwriting was unmistakably his own. "If you are reading this," the letter began, "then Nathan, Adrian, and Lucas kept their promises. That means I was right to trust them." Ethan continued reading while the 3 men remained respectfully silent behind him. "You probably believe something terrible happened last night. The truth is exactly the opposite. Last night we solved a problem that none of us could have solved alone. We discovered that someone had been quietly collecting information about each of us for months, waiting for the right opportunity to manipulate our decisions. We never allowed that plan to succeed because we acted before it was complete. The memory reset was never a punishment. It was our decision. By dividing the truth into separate memories, no single person could accidentally reveal everything before the right time." Ethan lowered the letter for a moment. Nathan, Adrian, and Lucas exchanged stunned glances. They had protected secrets they had not even realized they were carrying. Ethan resumed reading. The rings were never symbols of ownership. They were reminders of trust. Nathan promised to protect the beginning. Adrian promised to protect the truth in the middle. Lucas promised to protect the ending. My promise was different. I promised that when I finally remembered enough to understand everything, I would choose my own future instead of allowing fear to choose it for me. Ethan smiled faintly. For the first time since waking up, another memory returned without resistance. Standing on the rooftop beneath the sunrise. Laughing with the 3 men after hours of impossible conversations. Handing each of them a ring while saying that trust was strongest when it was shared instead of hidden. The mysterious figure in the dark coat had never been another person at all. It had been Ethan himself, photographed while wearing the borrowed coat that Lucas had draped over his shoulders against the morning breeze. The strange angle, the distance, and the reflections had transformed an ordinary moment into an impossible mystery. Ethan folded the letter carefully before looking back at the three men. "I remember enough now," he said softly. "Not everything, but enough." Nathan asked the question all three had been silently carrying. "What happens next?" Ethan looked toward the window where afternoon sunlight now filled the quiet room. He slipped the silver key into his pocket, leaving the three rings exactly where they belonged. "Now," he answered with quiet confidence, "we stop looking backward and find out why someone wanted us to doubt ourselves in the first place." Outside, Manhattan continued moving beneath a brilliant blue sky, completely unaware that one mystery had just ended while a far greater one had only begun.